Now, they're one of the world's biggest tobacco sellers, but Philip Morris plans to stop selling cigarettes in the UK within the next 10 years. The company, which owns the Marlboro brand, says it's looking to switch consumers to less harmful alternatives like e-cigarettes or heated tobacco devices. The CEO has also called for a government ban on cigarettes by 2030, saying the product should be treated like petrol, cars, which will also be banned by then. Well, let's talk to Justin Urquhart-Stewart, co-founder of Seven Investment Management. Justin, welcome. Turkey's voting for Christmas or a statement of the blindingly obvious? What is Philip Morris up to here, quitting smoking and calling for smoking bans?
It does seem remarkable, isn't it? Because Philip Morris just are the Marlboro brand, one of the greatest smoking brands in the world, and therefore saying we're no longer going to be actually fulfilling that. Well, what else are you going to be doing? E-cigarettes and heated-up tobacco products. Well, they may be reasonably large, but nowhere near the scale of the old Marlboro brand. So you're not going to live on that alone. No, what this company is having to do is having to change, just like virtually any other company which is involved in possibly less popular or less fashionable areas, such as, well, oil companies and mining companies and, of course, tobacco companies. What they're having to do now is adjust to these initials, which have now become so popular: ESG, environmental, social or sustainable, and governance. That's to say, almost making them more green and more acceptable, or use the trendy word, I suppose, almost wokish. Why? Well, because certain large investment companies like Legal & General in the UK or BlackRock in America are actually saying unless these companies start behaving in the right sort of way, doing the right sort of products, then they won't invest in them. So if you want to survive as a company like Philip Morris, you've got to find something else to do. But quite what they're going to be able to do other than making cigarettes isn't exactly clear at the moment, unless they're going to find some other sort of some brand that they can try and dig up and try and develop that in its place. So it's a very dramatic change, but one that's happening across all of those sort of companies. Even companies like BP are now saying they are beyond petroleum. You won't find an oil company now that calls itself an oil company. They're now an energy management business with a date, some date in the future, which hopefully no one will remember, when they'll say that they'll be carbon neutral. Such is the world now of this new green economy. But be wary, there's going to be a lot of greenwash around here, and I'm afraid some of these new shoots might turn out to be advanced mould.
Well, we'll talk about the oil companies in just a moment, but I just want to stick with tobacco for a moment. Smoking may be declining in the UK and Europe, but surely there are still fortunes to be made from smoking in less regulated economies around the world.
There are indeed, and a lot of the tobacco companies, in a rather sort of quite obvious manner, have been very happy to actually push the sale of cigarettes into the emerging economies, where there's still an awful lot of smoking going on and less idea that actually it is going to be banned anytime soon. So that's going to be their focus. But nonetheless, it is changing. You can see which way it's going. So the mature economies certainly now finding smoking is seen as being antisocial, a minority issue, which is quite remarkable. You see how that's changed in just less than 2 decades. And the same thing will be happening in emerging markets as well. And what Philip Morris have to work out is what on earth they're going to be doing in 20 years' time, because tobacco, frankly, ain't going to be it. But again, you go back to those oil companies, you'll find they're in the same position. In 100 years' time, who's going to want oil?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, it isn't just tobacco companies appearing to clean up their acts. As you say, oil companies are greenwashing themselves and renaming themselves energy companies. Do you think these companies are leading or following?
Well, the wise ones are trying to lead it and therefore trying to influence which way it's going. But they've already realised this has changed, and certainly this is something I've seen with investment clients as well over the past 5 years. 5 years ago, I had a sustainable fund set up nearly 20 years ago, and it wasn't very popular then because it was seen as a minority interest. Now, you go 5 years back and it was beginning to change. Now it's changed very dramatically. A lot of people want their portfolios to be seen to be acceptable, running with governance, with decent businesses run in the right way, with the ones which are socially acceptable and doing the right thing. And with all of that, of course, there goes this issue of being green as well. But you're quite right. There's an awful lot of greenwash going on here. So cynicism, I think, is directly required when companies saying that they're actually going to behave in the right way Well, I'm afraid when it comes to certainly financial services, some of them have a nasty habit of not exactly behaving in the right way. And a technical term I think we use for it sometimes in London is lying.
I couldn't possibly say, but perhaps if you take this to its logical conclusion, we soon stop investing in clothes, trainers, anything shipped from the other side of the world, or any food that might make us unhealthy, and fat, burgers, sugary drinks, alcohol perhaps. Where does ethical investment draw the line on treading lightly on our health and the earth?
And that's the trouble. Define everybody's ethics. One person's ethics of behaviour is someone's East Anglian county, which I'm afraid doesn't work very well in China, but that would be called Essex. But nonetheless, what you'll see is how do you define it, and what investors have to do is to be very clear as to what this business is standing for, and do they support it, and do they actually wish to invest in it. The problem is that some of these companies that are trying to do this, like Legal & General, and pick their way through it, find it difficult because the companies they invest in then promptly find themselves with subsidiaries that they've developed or bought, which then find themselves being sort of less greenish. So what do they then do? Do they have to sell out of them directly? And how fussy can you get? There are some extreme investment managers that have such a narrow level of investment that they have a very small number of companies they can invest in around the world. And if you're going to do that, you're probably not going to get a very good investment. But actually, using sustainability, doing the right thing, will effectively mean that actually those companies that are seen to be doing it properly will attract more investment. Or more to the point, those that don't will find themselves actually seeing some of the larger institutions moving away, and therefore the share prices fall.